Welcome to Rates and Barrels, presented by E-Trade from Morgan Stanley. Derek Van Riper here with a special guest. Senior writer from The Athletic, Keith Law, is here to discuss the 2025 MLB Draft. Maybe a little other prospect talk beyond the draft, time permitting as well. Keith, thank you for joining me in a stretch that has got to be one of your absolute busiest of the year. How's everything going for you?
I'm exhausted, actually. Thanks for asking. If I fall asleep in the middle of the podcast, yep, sure. Yesterday, I woke up in Atlanta to come home, right? I don't stay for the All-Star game because I don't care. And so I wake up early because I had a flight and I was trying to get home so I could do a bunch of writing. And then I had plans with my wife. We went to the Fish concert last night. I wake up, I jump in the shower. I didn't get enough sleep. I get out of the shower and there's a bunch of notifications on my phone that my flight has been canceled, flat canceled. And they've rebooked me on a flight that night to Chicago, overnight in Chicago, and a 5 a.m. flight home the next morning. I was like, oh, we are not doing that. I will drive home rather than do that. Ended up flying Atlanta to Tampa, 45-minute turnaround, Tampa to Baltimore, rented a car to drive home, got here in time to go to the concert, but as soon as you and I are done talking, I'm going to get in the rental car, return it to Philly to go get my actual car, which is still waiting for me at the Philly airport.
Oh, God. Okay. Now I feel another level of dedication to you staying with the commitment to join me on the show today. It sounds absolutely awful. I love the outright cancellation. And here, this is pretty much the same thing. It gets you there tomorrow. And no, that's not the same thing.
No.
Does not count. Please consult me about my itinerary.
I know people love to complain about airlines, and it's like I'm not blaming American. There was horrendous storms apparently in the mid-Atlantic. My guess is the plane never got there. You know, it's just my only complaint is like, oh, we're just going to book you. We're getting you there tomorrow is fine. I was like, that's not actually fine. Like, there's definitely other ways you could have maybe approached the situation after the cancellation, which weather is weather. I get it. If the plane is physically not in Atlanta, there's not a whole lot you can do. But there, especially up here in the Northeast, there's a bunch of airports I could have flown into that would have made this work. And they didn't. Yeah, they just didn't. So anyway, I'm home.
I'm glad you're home. Glad you made it back. Glad we could have this conversation and have it not be on a cell phone from some airport that's not even close to where you want to be.
Tampa. I flew to Tampa. I don't go to Florida unless I can't avoid it. But I couldn't avoid it. That was the only other option.
I don't think I've ever gone through Tampa's airport. Not one conference.
Actually, I will say
conference. Yeah.
The Tampa airport is pretty good. It's very easy to get around. It's easy in and out. I have no complaints about the Tampa airport. Tampa, the city, on the other hand, not my favorite.
Okay.
But I didn't have to leave the airport this time, so that was fine.
All right, so it's a small victory.
Yes.
Let's get to some draft talk. It didn't go down quite the way people expected with that first overall pick. I mean, there's a little twist up top. Eli Willits, a name that might be familiar to Angels fans and, I don't know, people that played fantasy baseball around 2007 because his dad, Reggie Willits, played for the Angels in that time, had 27 steals. He was fifth in the AL Rookie of the Year voting. Yeah, I mean, that was the thing that he could do. So even if you didn't have him on your team, you probably saw him on your waiver wire at some point. But it's his son that went first overall to the Nationals. And Eli Willits is the youngest first overall pick since Ken Griffey Jr. in 1987.
Is that true?
That little tidbit surprised me. I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing. Was there a below slot path that made them want to take Eli Willits with that pick? Did they get something else later that helped it make more sense? Or did they truly believe he was the best option on the board with that pick?
It's a complicated answer. None of that is yes or no. Not that's a bad question, but just because of the draft class this year and obviously the uncertainty of the Nationals choosing the ownership bizarrely to fire Mike Rizzo a week before the draft, which that's probably a topic for another pod. But so a couple of things come into play. Willits, some team models particularly loved Willits because he's super young. He's a shortstop. He makes really good swing decisions, and it is a good swing. He was not first on my board. He wouldn't have been my second or third choice, honestly. But money does come into play, and I don't know where he's going to come in exactly. My guess is, given how the rest of the top 10 plus ended up playing out, they might have been able to get a better deal somewhere else on a different player. But I have a feeling their model probably really pushed Willits also, and that combination ended up with him going with the first pick. And they did end up saving, I should say, end up saving to go over slot. They took their second pick was a college player, Ethan Petrie from South Carolina, who's just sort of big power bat, got a hit. I think it's first base only. But then they went high school. And at least two of those three guys, maybe all three of those guys, are going to require, I would say, over slot bonuses. Landon Harmon, the third rounder pitcher from Mississippi, and Coy James, shortstop with some real thump, who's got a ton of upside, offensive upside, particularly in the fifth round. Those guys, I think, are definitely going to require maybe strong seven-figure bonuses. I don't know as much. I've seen the fourth rounder, Miguel C. Jr. Actually saw him twice. I have a little less confidence just in knowing what he's going to require. I think that is a guy who absolutely has to sign. It's not like he's going to go to college and throw harder. He's listed at 6'4", 235. I saw him hit 100. I mean, the point that guy going to college is just asking for trouble for me. Like, it can really only go down. But he's committed to LSU, and if there's NIL money on the table, like, that has complicated a lot of these conversations. It's complicated a lot of the speculation. We used to really just sort of look at a college where a guy was committed, and if we knew something maybe about family circumstances, we could infer from that what his signability might be if he hadn't actually put out a number. But now with NIL money, it kind of doesn't matter. You can just say, well, look, the LSU is offering me $1.5 million over 3 years. You've got to beat that at least. So I don't know in any of these cases, but looking at those three guys, at least two of them are going to require over slot. What the Nationals also did then in round 6 through 10 was they took seniors and one fifth-year player who are all going to come in way under slot. So they'll also get some savings from there. I did say I guess my write-up hasn't run at the time we're recording this, but it will run on Thursday. One of those guys, Riley Maddox, a starter from Mississippi, is actually like a prospect for a senior. It's a very good senior sign. So it's not like they took zeros, but they clearly went to save money with those picks as well to try to get a little more creative with not just those picks 3, 4, 5, but I see a couple guys in 11 through 20. I think they may try to sign. One was a high schooler who's probably going to college, but a bunch of college juniors who aren't going to sign for zero. So if they have to go a little over the soft limit of 150, they should have a little flexibility to do so.
Yeah, so the broader context, likely some benefit to going this route as opposed to going with someone that was going to take, the full slot.
Right, which I think if it were Holliday, Ethan Holliday, who we can talk about at some point, that's the one guy where I looked at. I think we all looked at him and said, because he's so famous, brother went 1, Boris has represented the whole family. He's not going to take a huge haircut at the first pick. Might have signed a little bit under slot, but he was not going to sign. I think slot was 11. He wasn't going to sign for 7.5, or you're not getting a huge discount on that one. And I don't think Kade Anderson, who was also represented by Boris, and I think was kind of the consensus, I think just about all of us said in our final mocks that that's who they were going to take. I had mentioned Willits as a possibility, but I stuck with Anderson because I didn't have any hard information to the contrary. I don't think Anderson was going to take well under slot because he knew he had to have possibilities at 2, 3, etc., where he was going to get almost as much.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think the Nats, you don't draft for immediate needs, but you think about the way that team is built right now, Kade Anderson would have made a lot of sense too if they'd gone that route, because there were a handful of what appear to be pretty quick to the big league college arms in the first 10, 12 picks, right? Very, very reasonable. We could see all those guys pitching in the big leagues, but by this time next year?
I totally agree. Health permitting, Kade Anderson, who went 3rd, Liam Doyle, who went 5th, Jamie Arnold, who went 11th. All left-handers, all from major colleges. Health permitting, I think they're all in the big leagues by this date next year. Y'all can write it down. You can yell at me if it's wrong. I would definitely say, the over-under is 2. Barring health, right? Anybody can get hurt. They're pitchers. They all get hurt. We are far too blithe about just saying, well, they're pitchers, they get hurt, whatever. But setting that aside, I think all 3 of those guys are good enough, advanced enough, have present pitches to get big leaguers out, and that the teams that drafted them will push them, at least get them push them aggressively to get them to AAA in a short time frame, by which point, obviously, you could just sort of reach down and call them up whenever you have the opportunity.
And this is becoming increasingly common, right? We see pitchers coming out of college programs that have better coaching, better tech, better everything. Guys do look more major league ready, like by scouting, like by metrics, by everything we have at our disposal. So it's not surprising. This draft as a whole, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is another step towards the teams are leaning more heavily towards college players because they're faster to the big leagues. Like, is this a growing trend too? Is like the proximity becoming more important to organizations that are not as interested in having a high school kid take 4 or 5 years in the minors to be ready to pitch in the big leagues?
I think it's really changed the calculus when deciding between a high school player and a college player, particularly near the top of the draft. Now, most teams, I actually don't know if any teams don't do it this way. When you're talking about the top of the draft, you have one list. As I hold up 2 fingers, one list. All your high school and college players are together. And you may get later in the draft where you start separating guys more by category. But at the top, it's like, who's the best player available? Who do we think is? Who does the model say is? Whatever it is. But that calculus at the very top of the draft now, your college players in the top 10, maybe 15 picks are almost all guys you think are very close to ready. And if you look, I should pull this up before sort of talking out of the air. I can only think of one guy taken in that range who was not an SEC or no, I'm sorry, there were 2 because Oregon State is the outlier. That's right. I was thinking of Tyler Bremner at UCSB. And Oregon State was independent for a year as they wait for the Pac-12 to sort of reconstitute itself. But typically, these guys up top too, they come from the SEC or the ACC. They're by far the best level of competition. And those are the guys, if you succeed in one of those conferences, you should succeed at least in AA right now. Like, I would expect any of those bats taken out of those conferences. Gavin Killen, who I loved in this draft. I thought that was a great pick for the Giants at 13. He could go to AA Richmond by the end of this summer, or at the very worst, start there next year if they just want to keep him out west for the spring, whatever. There's obviously other considerations. But my point is, those guys move really fast. The expectation is they're going to get there really quick because they're super polished. That's true of the pitchers, too. You draft a pitcher out of those conferences, they've generally had a ton of success facing the best lineups that there are in college baseball. Nearly all of them throw really hard at this point. Jamie Arnold's an exception, but typically they got there because they have big velocity and at least one knockout second pitch. And again, same thing. Those guys should be ready to drop in and go to AA. Whereas the high school guys, like you said, they tend to take longer. So you are trying to balance guy who might help us in 12 to 15 months and also who's going to look really good right away because we're going to send him to high A or AA and he should rake or he should miss a bunch of bats versus high school guy who might get there in 4 or 5 years and may have more upside in the long run, but has more risk. Ethan Holliday was number 1 on my board. He has more risk than all these college guys we're talking about here. I think he has more upside. I think you've got a chance for a 30-homer shortstop or maybe a sort of Scott Rowland-ish type profile at third base if he does have to move. That's a pretty good player. But you may have to wait a long time on that, and a lot of teams don't want to. There's further risk inherent in that, and you all might get fired before that guy ever sees the big leagues too.
Yeah, that's a huge part of the calculus, I think, too, with the high school guys up top.
Right?
It's the reality of the business. I mean, it's Seth Hernandez to the Pirates at 6. Absurd stuff for a high schooler. And the name that came to mind as a comparative sort of question is, where does Seth Hernandez grade out right now compared to, say, Jackson Jobe, who the Tigers took 3rd overall at a high school in 2021? Because I feel like that's more of an apples to apples sort of comparison. Like, what are the realistic skills that Hernandez has now? Is he as good as Jobe was coming out of high school? Is he better?
I don't think so. And I am basing that not just on what I have, and I should qualify just with Jobe, because we were coming out of the pandemic and he was kind of a little bit on an island there in Oklahoma. I didn't see him live in his draft year. I did see Hernandez this spring at NHSI at the USA Baseball Complex. But going off, obviously, video that I had access to at the time, and I asked scouts, longtime scouts, that question. Is he better than Jobe? Is he better than Painter, who were the 2 best high school pitchers in their respective draft years? and who Job obviously got to the big leagues already. Painter is going to be in the big leagues, like maybe by the time we finish this podcast. And, unfortunately, Painter had Tommy John. Job has now had Tommy John. Huge risk of all pitchers, but particularly of high school pitchers. Job was better at the time of the draft. Job was the third overall pick. He had a better fastball quality. He was an elite athlete. Hernandez is a good athlete. Job was just kind of on another level. And if you're grading out Job's individual pitches as a whole, and then to sort of putting them together into the whole package, they grade out ahead of Hernandez. You might argue Hernandez's changeup is better than Job's was at the time of the draft. There are certain points in Hernandez's favor, but the consensus was Job was better. To which I would also add, right now, Job was taken 4 years ago. He has missed a lot of time with various injuries and now has had Tommy John, which sucks, but that is part of the risk, particularly of guys who throw super hard at a young age. I think there is a correlation there, at least. Can't totally prove causation, but throwing really hard a lot when you're very young, most of those guys, a high percentage of those guys seem to have to undergo the zipper eventually. And so Job is not going to return real big league value for 6 years from the draft, 5+ years from the draft, and that's probably the best high school pitching prospect we've seen, at least on the last 6 or 7 drafts, maybe a little bit further back. Because I feel like 2019, Quinn Priester was the first one. It was just a bad year for high school pitching too, overall. So yeah, the best guy is going to take a really long time to return value, and we'll see what he comes back with. And I still think Job will be at least a number 2 starter, but it's not great. It's just not a great path to a return. I understand the Hernandez pick. I wouldn't have done it. I'm not saying it's a bad pick at all. Just I am very anti taking high school pitchers pretty much anywhere in the first round, particularly towards the top of the first round, because those guys tend to be guys who've shown major league-ish stuff right now, bigger velocity right now, and I think they fail at higher rates. You want to take high school pitchers later in the draft, but the Phillies took a guy not too dissimilar in the 7th round named Matthew Fisher, and I'm sure they're going to pay him close to first round money. That's great because the opportunity cost of a 7th round pick is basically 0. The odds of getting a big leaguer in the 7th round are really, really low. So you want to take high school pitchers down there all day long. It's just where the Pirates took him. We can talk about other names. I'll stop ranting. But I'm looking at the draft. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. At least 7 of the next 8 picks are guys I would have taken over Hernandez and it's just because he's a high school pitcher.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And for a high school pitcher now to want to take the bonus money and go through the long trek through the minors versus getting NIL money in college, I feel like that balance has shifted too.
Yes.
I would be much more inclined to choose college because I think you'll continue to develop on your way to the big leagues and get paid a lot more money than you will in A-ball. So that's another thing to think about too. If you're a high school kid that throws really hard, go to Wake, go to Tennessee, go to LSU, Go to one of those places. You'll be better off for it in the long run. And if you do blow out your shoulder or your elbow, at least you're getting paid a healthy amount of money while you rehab your way back.
And in Hernandez's situation, obviously he's going to sign because he's going to get $5 million or more, something from the Pirates. But just taking him away from where he was drafted for a second, he is 19. So he would be draft eligible again in 2 years. He just has to stay healthy for 2 years. It's not a guarantee, but obviously better chance than 3. He's committed to Vanderbilt, SEC school, incredible academic school. If he cares, I don't know him, but if you care about such things, I'm sure his mom does. You're going to contend every year. Vanderbilt's just about always in the tournament. Good chance to get to Omaha. Great city. Like there's a lot to say for it. LSU, they win the World Series every 2 or 3 years, right? If you want to go somewhere and win a college championship and be a part of something, and be a part of a great tradition, there's a lot to, and by the way, get paid. There's a lot to say for that. And so I don't blame kids for doing that. I really like when they're up front. I don't like players who just pull their name out of the draft at the last second or change their expectations at the very last second. Like just be transparent with everybody so that teams will just say, okay, that's great. Go to school. We will see you in 2 or 3 years. But you ask scouts, they say, that's great. We totally respect that. Just don't kind of lead us astray is all. Don't let us spend a lot of time scouting you, talking to you, etc., when you're really not that interested in the first place. With Hernandez, I think it was always clear if he went in an appropriate spot in the draft, he was going to sign. It wasn't going to come cheap. But I think for a lot of other guys, that balance is a little bit more, there's a little bit more to say for the college side, because the college money may be pretty close to the pro money. And like you said, it's a different environment, it's different culture, it's a different experience. I totally understand guys who want to do that. Particularly if you're going to, I have a lot of respect for Vanderbilt as not just a baseball school, but an academic institution. It's pretty awesome. You want to go there for 3 years and hang out in Nashville and play for one of the best teams in Division I and face the best competition? Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, that's a pretty good life, I think, at that phase of your development.
Yeah.
So,
and if you want to grow up, I talk about this a lot. That I was 17 when I started college, totally immature. Nobody should have handed me a job, let alone had me go ride buses and try to be part of a team and all that stuff. I mean, that was not, just be clear, never actually an option for me, right? Some kids may just say, I'm not ready. I know that I hear that I didn't hear that this year specifically, but I've heard that over the years where some players have just told scouts, I don't think I'm ready for pro ball. I don't think I'm emotionally ready. Some guys may not really be physically ready. Might just have to get bigger and stronger, which you would like to think they would between ages 18 and 21. And that's fine. That's totally, again, another thing I completely respect. Be upfront about it. Just say, I don't think pro ball's for me right now. Great. We will see you in 3 years.
So it didn't take long for the biggest surprise of day one to unfold. The Angels, with that second pick, took Tyler Bremner out of UC Santa Barbara. I couldn't rationalize this, Keith. Why pass on Liam Doyle? Why pass on Kade Anderson? Why pass on Jamie Arnold? We know the Angels want to move guys quickly, and Bremner, as a college pitcher, they can move him quickly, and it's not total malpractice. But what do you think the Angels might have been thinking here?
I actually think this is an evaluation thing. I think they really did like Bremner more than the other options. I don't know. Maybe that they know the kid better. You see, he is local. They may have a lot more history there. Bremner also, for folks who don't know the story, his mother died of cancer in, I think, May, or it might have been early June, but this spring. And this was going on, she was clearly heading that direction all spring. And a lot of people have said this may have impacted his pitching, his performance, especially in the early part of the spring. Completely understandable. And a terrible thing for someone that young to go through. He came into the spring pretty clearly as the number one right-handed prospect in the draft. And he was terrible early. I actually saw his worst start. Second weekend of the year, he's facing the University of Seattle. No disrespect to Tariq School, but that is not a powerhouse. And they tagged him, I think, for 7 runs. And they were all over his fastball. He stopped locating it after the first inning. The slider was really not great. And he couldn't get to the changeup, which is by far his best pitch. He gets good spin rates on the sliders, but I think because of where he lands, he just is constantly cutting the pitch off, and he cannot get the kind of tilt and break to the glove side that makes that an effective right on right pitch for him. That may be fixable too. And he's got plenty of arm strength. He generally throws strikes. He finished really strongly. I think if I had just happened to go see him in May, I might have just had a very different opinion of him. And I did keep moving him up my rankings as the season progressed, because I would hear from people he was pitching better, and I could see the results, and I could see the video, see the quality of the stuff was all there. It was hard to get the early looks out of my mind, and I do have that real concern that breaking ball is always going to look better on paper or in the computer than it does in the actual games, and they're going to have to fix that. So I don't think it was a wrong pick. I don't think it was a bad pick, but it was a shock when they said that. I think we all thought most of the spring, I kept hearing they're just going to take Doyle and put him in the big leagues. And I was like, great. I thought he was the best pitcher in the draft class. It is an invisible fastball. It's up to 100. The splitter is real. It's more than enough of a slider. I do not have big issues with the delivery. Some people do. Take that guy and put him in the big leagues. And so when they said Bremner, that was a kind of a jaw dropper. And I mean, honestly, at that moment, I was like, wait, Willits and Bremner have gone 1-2. What the hell is going on here? And after that, actually, it was pretty much the expected names. I think I'm just glancing at this. The only other big surprise in the top 16 and modest surprise was when the Reds took Steele Hall. But I'd heard his name floating around in that range and just never heard him connected to them specifically. I did think he wasn't going to get much further than about 12 or so. And then it wasn't until the Cubs took Ethan Conrad, who from Wake Forest, who'd had shoulder surgery in early April. So his status was just very up in the air. That was the next time somebody selected someone where I thought, oh, that's completely unexpected. I didn't think he was going to go in the first for medical reasons, just because of the surgery.
Yeah, I think Conrad, just reading your write-ups, he seems like one of the more intriguing risk-reward propositions of the first round for sure. A guy that, had he been healthy all spring, might have been in the conversation for, a top 5 pick? I mean, I don't think that'd be out of the question based on how well his season started and what he'd done previously.
He needed to do it against ACC pitching. We never got to see it. So you're left with this question, right? Do you buy the data and the brief scouting looks from non-conference competition? I think he played 2 or 3 ACC series. He did not see much good pitching, and he transferred in from Marist. So we basically just have summer of 24, brief looks this spring. Is he going to be able to do it against better quality pitching? If he does, that's a steal. If he doesn't, it's an overdraft. Not a disastrous one, because I think he's a good player. But is he 6th, where they took 17th in the country? Good. I feel like he's not 17th, right? He's top 10, or he's not a first rounder. But it's very unlikely that he actually just lands right down the middle. He's either a lot better and he just got to 17 because he was hurt and we didn't see him against the better pitching, or he just wasn't a first rounder. We never got to see him struggle against better quality pitching.
So I didn't think a lot about Oregon State and the impact of the Pac-12 being decimated, and Stanford being part of the ACC, and the chaos that would ensue on Oregon State specifically from a baseball perspective. Aiva Arquette went 7 overall to the Marlins, and you indicated he's very likely to move to third base because he's big. He's huge.
He's
for a shortstop.
Very big.
Even though it seems like but he moves pretty well for his size,
really well.
Right?
He does. He does. I'm just laughing because it's very disconcerting. Where I saw him at one of the Globe Life tournaments that they do in Arlington, Texas every spring, which are fantastic. And I'm standing on the first base side behind their dugout just because I was watching I don't remember which hitter. I was watching a hitter. Arquette, I might have been waiting for him to hit, actually. But he comes off shortstop towards me. I'm not even talking to anybody. And I just go, holy, out loud. Because I saw how big I know 6'5", but I mean, that guy is broad. Like, that is just an atypical shortstop's body. And it's one of those, like, God, if he doesn't grow up in Hawaii, does he end up, like, if he grows up in Alabama, is he even playing baseball? Every sport would want a guy who looks like that. In high school, I'm sure every coach, they were like punching each other to get him to come play their sport. But he moves really well at shortstop. He's got a great arm. I think his hands are fine. It's just guys that big, especially as they get a little bit older, tend to slow down a little bit and end up moving to another position. You can see that guy at third base. He's still big, but that guy plays third base all the time. So even if he does move, though, completely fine with the pick. I love the bat. I love the player. If it's shortstop, he should have gone 1. If it's third base, he could still be an all-star. So regardless of where he ends up of those 2 spots, and I don't think it's anywhere else, I did think it was a great pick.
Yeah, it does seem like a guy that, like, for the fantasy-focused folks out there, it landed in a spot where he can move quickly, will play wherever he needs to play, and the bat is high floor with good ceiling, too. So a ton to like there. But I was thinking about Oregon State. How much more difficult was it to evaluate that roster given the unusual makeup of their schedule?
And so they had 4 or 5 guys coming in who I wanted to see. Arquette was obviously the sort of jewel in the crown. Gavin Turley, who I think went in the 4th round to the A's, was also kind of a name out of high school, and I wanted to see him. And they had a couple others, sort of lower prospects. And I specifically picked that series for 2 reasons. One is because Corvallis is like impossible to get to. It might as well be in Guam. And I love Portland, too. I mean, it's not like I want to turn down a chance to go to Portland. There are no nonstop flights from Philly to Portland. And then you got to drive 2 hours to Corvallis. That is just not a good use of my limited time or budget. So I went to see them at Globe Life, but also it was slightly better competition than they were going to face kind of the rest of the spring. They did the best they could with what they had. And hopefully once the Pac-12 is reconstituted and we get into some regular conference play, and those schools will be able to recruit off being in the Pac-12, assuming some NIL money shows up. What we've seen in the last couple of years, a lot of the best high school talent on the West Coast is actually committing. They're all committing to SEC and ACC schools. I went to see Gavin Fein, who was the 12th pick, and each pitcher for that in that high school game, they were both major D1 commits, and all three of those guys were committed to SEC or ACC schools. I think it was Texas A&M, LSU, and Clemson that day. California. These are Southern California kids. How are they not going to UCLA? How are they not going to Stanford? I'm hoping that once the Pac-12 gets itself back together, some more of those kids will stay home. I want West Coast college baseball to be strong again. It was. Pac-12 was the jewel in the crown for most of college baseball history, I would say. That's only shifted in the last 10, 15 years or so. But it made it hard to evaluate those Oregon State hitters in particular because they just didn't see the same level of pitching as ACC or SEC prospects did. So that's why I wanted to get out there and see them early. And it wasn't the greatest competition, but it was better, certainly. And I think scouts did struggle with that, where, I mean, you couldn't go see Arquette and see him not hit. He hit all season. He hit everybody. But he didn't face Liam Doyle, right? He didn't face, Kade Anderson or Kyson Witherspoon. Guys, some of the best arms in the entire country in the entire draft. And I don't really doubt that he's going to hit those guys, but it would help to see them. Just a little higher confidence level. Maybe he goes 1 if he does that. If he plays in the SEC and rakes, he probably is a consensus 1-1 pick at that point.
Yeah, I think that's the strange thing about the makeup of the ACC right now for me. The strangest thing, that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a few.
Cal and Stanford landing in there.
What does the A stand for again? Can you remind me?
I don't think it stands for anything anymore.
No, alternative Coast Conference?
Yeah, yes. The Alternative Coast Conference. Yeah. There you go. So, I mean, for the West Coast top-end players that want to play in that conference but don't want to relocate across the country to do it, I guess they've got 2 options still with Cal and Stanford, so long as their presence in the ACC continues. I don't know. I feel like we're gonna see a lot more change before we see stability in college sports.
I saw Stanford at UNC, and I felt bad for them. I'm like, this stinks. It's cold. You had to fly across the whole country. There was one where it was Big Ten, but either USC or UCLA was at Rutgers. Oregon played at Maryland. What are we doing?
Yeah.
I understand that money talks here, obviously, but the point of these conferences, they were geographically focused because you just played who was local because it was cheap. And that's what it should be. I understand college baseball, college sports are a huge business now, but now I'm actually probably a little less concerned about the money, but also, do you go to class?
How could you? You're
how
spending
could you possibly
the day before a weekend series somewhere else. You are on a plane all day, so it
makes no sense. Well, they take online classes. Well, just stay home. I don't understand that at all. My daughter's in college, and she's like, "Oh, I have this one class that's online." I'm like, "Are you not at college? Did I not just drop you off at college? You're taking an online class at college." I sound like an old man now, but I do not understand this. Everyone should go. If you are on campus, you should go to class. You're physically able to. You should be going to class. I don't get it.
Hey, I see it the same way, so I must be old too. Let's talk about Liam Doyle for a minute. I noticed the Cardinals at 5 was this the first time they picked that early since J.D. Drew in 1998. And we're just not used to seeing the Cardinals up high. It was J.J. Weatherford at 7 last year. I think that was the first time they were in single digits in 15, 20 years. It's been a long, long time. The more I think about the Cardinals, the more I think the influence of Chaim Bloom is going to increase. He's taking over for John Mozeliak at the end of the season. The types of players that they're getting and how their player development machine works is also going to be different in the near future. And as a person who roots for a team in that division that is not the Cardinals, I am a little nervous about their ability
one of the best
to.
Fans in baseball?
No, I'm not. But I'm a little concerned, Keith. I think they're actually putting something kind of scary together here. It might take a couple of years for it to be fully functioning, but I hate to say it, I like the direction they're heading right now.
Yeah, I would agree. Actually, I love what they're doing. I think their player development is getting a lot better, particularly on the pitching side. Weatherhold's a stud. He was in the futures game too. That guy's going to hit, and he's going to get there real fast. He also came in kind of a finished product. They needed to modernize a lot of things over there, and they've already started doing so. They've brought in some great people on player development side, and you're already starting to see some results in the pitching department. In Doyle, I don't think Doyle needs a lot, but there's definitely some things they could do to set him up for more success, I would say. And seeing them take him. I was like, oh God, this guy might be even better than I thought. Like, it would not surprise. It doesn't change the evaluation, but just that combination and what they've been doing on the pitching side. My immediate reaction was, oh, he might end up. I mean, maybe he's a number one starter at some point. If he holds up, if he stays healthy, like, that's a pretty interesting fit. And they haven't drafted a guy like that in ever. Right? They've taken pitchers high. They've had some pitchers come in and maybe gain some velocity, but Doyle comes in with a lot more present stuff than any of the McGreevy's and Graceffos and other guys they've brought into the system. So yeah, very, very intrigued when I heard that that's who they were taking a couple minutes before the pick. It's like, oh, I really like that. I really like that combination. Sorry.
As far as their class as a whole, though, it was a pretty solid group across the board, wasn't it?
I thought so. I thought they did a bang up job. They've drafted. It's funny because they've had a lot of head scratchers. Randy Flores has been there for a long time. They've had a lot of picks where it's like, I don't get that at all. But then they've had years where the year they took Jordan Walker, who he got to the big leagues. It hasn't worked out so far, but it may still work out. And he got there really fast. And certainly he had trade value at some point. Mason Wynn, Alec Burleson, all in the same draft. I think I'm forgetting one other guy who was from that same draft class. Thomas DeJacy, who has gotten to the big leagues and is a prospect. Like, they have had a lot of really good drafts, and I absolutely loved what they did, particularly 1-2 in this draft. And they had a couple more interesting guys later. But Ryan Mitchell, I thought it was a first-round bat, and it's just, he is not a shortstop. Probably center field. Doesn't throw well, which is always, there's a risk that you move, you sort of end up with the Coco Crisp, Shannon Stewart problem where they're fast enough to play center, but end up playing left because of the arm potentially. But we'll see. We'll see what the arm looks like once he's playing the outfield regularly. They already announced that they're moving him out there, and that guy can hit. He can definitely hit. So, and getting him at the 55th pick seemed like a steal, certainly relative to where I ranked him coming in. So I thought that was a really strong, really, really strong 1-2. And then took some intriguing guys after that. And Tanner Franklin's actually kind of interesting as an arm who got a ton of arm strength. Like, that's a guy where you just hand him to player development. It's like, fix that. See what you can do with that. And at worst, he's, Liam Doyle's got a buddy because they both went to Tennessee.
Yeah. And maybe a high leverage reliever it is an easy path.
Yeah. That's always there. Right. But yeah, it'll be very interesting. He's just got to throw better strikes. There's a lot to work with. There's a lot to like. He's got size. He's got arm strength. It's not a starter's package, but otherwise, yeah, I get it. Probably a little higher than I would have taken him, but I also don't know how they're moving some of the money around. It's a really interesting draft class. I was very impressed. And honestly, if all it turns out to be is Doyle and Mitchell make it, but they're what I think they are, that's good enough.
Looking at the back of the top 10, you got JoJo Parker to the Blue Jays at 8, Steele Hall to the Reds, you mentioned earlier, at 9, and Billy Carlson to the White Sox at 10. 3 guys that actually, I think, should stay at shortstop, or at least could stay at shortstop. Parker of the 3 seems the least likely, based on what I read from your reports.
Maybe. Yes.
And you describe Billy Carlson as a wizard with the glove. And he's got power already, so I guess this is a big question on hit tool. And with your write-up, you said, if you believe in your player development's ability to help someone improve or optimize a swing, he's an excellent upside play. And I think the great unknown for me today is if the White Sox have that group of coaches in place, because they have not historically, at least in the last 10 to 15 years, been the type of organization that makes hitters a lot better. Many of the players they have been able to bring in were international free agents who were either finished product. I mean, Jose Abreu was an absolute finished product already.
Course, yeah.
And we talked about this on our Friday episode. Tim Anderson was a first round pick. Like, he kind of hit the typical sort of first round development arc, right? But do they have that now? Have there been enough changes with Chris Getz in the big chair to where you look at Billy Carlson and say, the hit tool is going to be fine there? Or are we talking about glove first, fun guy that hits homers, but 230, 290 types, average OBP, or it's like the defense carries everything, the power's there occasionally, and then the hit tool is the thing we're always hoping for more of?
So this is the big test, right? I don't think we have the answer to that. I don't think they've had a lot of opportunities to sort of prove that the new staff there is ready to take on a challenge like this. Because everything, obviously, you read what I wrote. I agree with myself. He's an incredible defensive shortstop. Like, it is crazy to watch. I watched him at that NHSI event at USA Baseball, we were talking about earlier, and just watching Carlson move. He's got a cannon of an arm because he doesn't want to pitch, but he did pitch in high school. He doesn't want to do that at the next level. Just watching him move, that's a teenager. I think he'll be 19 in 2 weeks, and he plays like an advanced big leaguer at shortstop. It's really impressive, and there is power. But his swing needs a ton of help. He bars that lead arm. His hands just kind of, as had somebody describe it, his hands get lost in back. And I love that phrasing because it's just hard for him from where his hands are to get the barrel to the right spot, to the ball, to the zone consistently on time. And I think if untouched, that's like a 290 or less on base guy with some power, which might still play in the big leagues because he's so good at shortstop, but he could be more. And that is the big test for them. And, I think the most recent example we've had of the White Sox trying to fix a guy's swing would be Colson Montgomery, who started this season as bad as he's ever been. They sent him back to the complex. They returned him to AAA. He hit somewhat better. They did make some adjustments to the swing. It was great. They brought him up when they were playing at Colorado. I wonder why that is. And since they left Colorado, he's 2 for 18 with just 2 singles. That's just right. He's not ready. Now, maybe I'm not saying that if he doesn't work out, that's an indictment. I'm just saying we do not have yet a great example of the White Sox taking a guy, changing his swing to make him a better hitter. And the previous regime, and Getz was part of that too, although my understanding is he was very kind of hamstrung by the ownership and the sort of dysfunction they had in the front office. The previous player development group under Getz wasn't able to do all of the things or invest in all the things they wanted to do. They've been doing more of that now, but they had a lot of failures there, right? Andrew Vaughn, I think, is probably one of the biggest flops of my career. He was the 3rd pick in the draft. He never failed to hit in 3 years at Cal. They absolutely rushed into the big leagues. That did not help. And then he never got better. In fact, he just kept getting worse to the point where he's 27 and he might not be in the majors next year, which is crazy to me. So there's a lot riding on Carlson, I think, in terms of this is the first big test for this player development group. We are handing you a guy who really could be a superstar, but he's got at least one major thing that player development needs to work on with him. Here you go. And honestly, the guy they took second, Jaden Fosky, was a local kid who I saw, and I like the swing's shape once it gets going, but there are small things they're going to have to do there too. They went aggressive for upside, and I like their draft a lot, but a lot is now riding on player development, helping. God, I'm looking 1, 2, 4 of these guys, 4 of their high picks at the very least.
For at least a moment, and I think we can still keep an eye on this over the course of the rest of the season, it looked like they had made some adjustments with Miguel Vargas to get him back on track. And I know if you take a snapshot from, I don't know, like May 1st forward, he's kind of a league average hitter during that span, 15% K rate, 9 homers. I mean, that's a better version of Vargas than what we saw post-trade deadline, right? So yeah, at any point with the Dodgers too, in the big leagues anyway, like that's a step forward. So we'll see where it goes. And Montgomery, I mean, I guess the silver lining, tiny sample, is only struck out 20% of the time to this point in the big leagues. Maybe they fix some of the swing and miss, but we need a lot more sample before we can have any sort of confidence that the adjustments have kicked in. And I don't know, Colson Montgomery, Keith, I mean, could there be AAA fatigue? This is a guy that was, he's there for almost 200 games already. Yeah, 130 games in 2024, 55 games this year. At a certain point, you're a prospect like that, you got to be like, okay, what are we doing here? Like I'm hitting the wall.
To me, this is the risk of when you send a guy to AAA before he's ready. And I mean, I worry they're doing this with Noah Schultz. They've done this with a lot of guys under the previous regime and the current regime. You cannot promote guys before they're ready. I don't know what they're seeing. I don't know what their reasoning is on some of these promotions. They are not the only org that does this. So this is more of a general observation. But when you do push a guy to a level for which he's clearly not ready because he has not made sufficient adjustments at the previous level, you run into this possibility, especially in AAA, where you can't, right? If you move him up again, he's just going to get somebody, I'm going to sanitize the comment, but a scout who'd seen Montgomery a lot the last couple of years said he's going to get his teeth kicked in. And since those games in Colorado, he hasn't done anything. He's not impacting the ball at all. So what do? You send him back down, talk about prospect fatigue, talk about his fatigue, right? AAA fatigue at that point. I mean, I'm sure he's like, that's the last thing I want to do is go back to AAA again. But, if you leave him in the majors, does he continue to struggle more? Does he end up kind of on a downhill path from here? That's not good for him. It's just a challenge. And I'm often banging the drum saying, promote this guy, promote this guy, promote this guy. It was all over the Tigers. Why? It's like, why is Rogers Hornsby, Kevin McGonigal, not in Double-A? He is now. But they could have done that 3 weeks earlier. When the first half ended in the minor leagues, they should have done that. Why was Charlie Condon not in Double-A sooner? Like, I argue for guys to get promoted, but because I think they're ready. Or because in the case of Condon, it's like he is doing too much. He's not being sufficiently challenged in high A. You need to get him to Double-A because this guy has had issues, particularly right on right sliders. He did not look good against them in a very brief look in the Futures game. Challenge him at the next level. Montgomery was the opposite. I don't think he really earned that promotion to AAA in the first place, and that's why we're kind of in trouble there in a very difficult spot with him. We're keeping him up may not be a good idea, but sending him down may not be a good idea either.
And even the timing of promoting him to AAA, I think, was probably complicated by the injuries he had prior to that promotion. Like,
big back injury that, like, I don't think he's ever looked the same since the back injury. And if you told me at some point, I've asked White Sox people, they said, we really don't think this is the issue. But if it came out at the end of the day, a couple years from now, it's like, yeah, the back was just bothering me for years, and I never felt like I got the same core strength back or whatever it was. I'd be like, that explains so much. So much. A significant back injury like that may recur or cause lasting effect, completely plausible and out of everyone's control. Like, you don't want that to be true, but often when you see a guy he was so good that first full year, was that 22 in the minors, then got hurt and hasn't really been the same since. It's hard to reconcile those things, right? What happened to the guy we saw in 2022, the guy I saw in high A, and it's like, holy crap, they got one. They absolutely got one here. I thought he was going to hit. I was like, he plays better at shortstop than anyone ever gave him credit for. And since he's come back from the injury, he's never looked good at shortstop, and he's never hit the same. So maybe it was the back.
Yeah, he was rolling in the fall league 2 falls ago now. I mean, everyone can hit in the fall league, but
it's true.
Even relative,
you can hit in the fall league. Yeah.
I don't know. Almost everyone can.
I'll ask the Brewers if they'll send you this time.
They will not waste a spot.
They gotta have room for you.
I don't think they're going to waste a spot on me. I'm pretty confident they'll go literally anybody else. I was going to ask you, are high school hit tools getting better, kind of in the same way that college pitchers are coming out of college with better stuff? Because reading a lot of the write-ups, especially contact ability and hit tool. I mean, Parker's hit tool, I think you were pretty high in your praise of that specifically, but are high school hitters just getting better bat to ball? Are they seeing better stuff and still doing more with it?
It's a great question. And first of all, there's always the possibility that I'm wrong and none of these guys can hit, just to be clear. But I do think what I saw a lot of it this year, and I do think it is a bit of, I don't know if I quite call it selection bias, but it's like we have made it clear as an industry that we value 2 things in hitters. And typically you do one or the other. For a while now, do you have like elite exit velocities, right? We love those guys where I think we're too obsessed with those guys. And at some point it's like, yeah, that's cool, but can you hit? Because I don't care if you hit 116 at the combine, if you can't actually hit 94, can't hit a breaking ball. But there's another type of player we really like, which are the guys who show they can really make a ton of contact with a little impact. But there are plenty of teams that say, we can't really teach you to hit, but we can teach you to hit it harder, or we can teach you to pull the ball in the air more. But first you got to hit. JoJo Parker is that type. Ryan Mitchell, who I mentioned with the Cardinals, he is that type. And there were quite a few of those guys this year, those really high contact hitters, more high school, a few in the college ranks, but you notice it's one thing I always notice after the draft too, especially once I get past the, say 4th round or so. And it's a lot of guys where I don't have much on. I might have a sentence or I have some data and I just go and follow up with other scouts or follow up with the video. And I look, it's like, wow, we really love to take those high contact hitters once we get to about the 6th, 7th round, don't we? Because it's like, well, at least this guy will hit in the low minors. We'll see what we can do. I get it. I totally get it. I'm not criticizing the approach at all. When I happen to run into one of those guys in the spring and I see a swing and like, wow, that guy, that looks like it's going to make a ton of contact. And I look and the data backs up the observation. It's not somebody I would ever rank necessarily, put in a write-up, but he's always in the back of my mind. So, that guy might hit. Just remember, he might. Don't be surprised when he gets called in the 7th round. And it's because it matches up, right? Those guys, there are teams that say, we can teach you to pull the ball in the air. The Dodgers have been doing this forever. We can teach you to pull the ball in the air, but we can't teach you to hit. Now, that said, the Dodgers' last couple of drafts have taken a couple of high school guys who are in the opposite direction. Mason Lagenza this year, Chase Harlan last year, high schoolers, both from Pennsylvania, who hit it really hard, but the hit tool is a big question. So obviously they think they can do both. I'm not going to tell them they're wrong, but for a long time, their thing was, if you can hit and you have underlying characteristics like you hit it hard enough, we will teach you to pull the ball in the air more. Will Smith being probably the absolute canonical example for them. And we will make you take you from a big leaguer to a star.
I think I should believe that fixing either weakness is possible, but I must be just trained to believe that having the hit tool first is the better foundation to start with, because correcting swing and miss is a lot more challenging. But we do live in the era of traject machines and different things that can give you better training environments to maybe fix those flaws. So maybe the Dodgers are slightly ahead and trying something a little different there.
And you know who does this a ton? The Orioles. The Orioles love it, and they did it again this year, and I don't hate their draft. I like their draft this year way more than I liked their draft last year, but it is a lot of the same type of like great exit velocities, great batted ball characteristics, questionable hit tools, or questionable swing decisions. Now, I would take this year's group, not the least because they took Ike Irish, catcher who's going to the outfield. Vicky Valaloy, shortstop. Caden Bodine, definitely a catcher. They seem to have mixed it up a little bit better positionally and sort of raising the floor. And some of these guys have better hit tools than the Vance Honeycutts and Ethan Andersons, et cetera, from last year. But in general, I completely agree with your philosophy there that it is. And it's even more true now because of what pitchers can do. It's really, really hard to hit. And teaching a guy to hit is not just a matter of having him take a lot of reps with one of these machines that can simulate all types. So you can plug in all the characteristics and it can throw Garrett Cole's slider to you. Like, that's cool, but that's not all that's required. And there's so much more that goes into hitting. And to me, this is why you can show me video of a guy and I can say if I think there's power and I can say if I think there's speed and that, but you really got to see a guy hit. And I would say overall long sample and see it in game situations to get that feel. And I feel like teams that don't scout anymore, they end up in some trouble in that department because data gives you a lot of it. It doesn't give you the whole picture. It gets you a good bit of the way, but you've got to fill it in and see the hitting, particularly on the hit tool. It's the hardest thing to assess. And so I think you have to data gives you the details, the real granular stuff, but you lack the context. And that is what a good traditional scout, I think, can provide you with.
Yeah, I think the organizations having the most success do well in both of those areas. They are not neglecting the scouting side the way some teams have chosen to do in recent years. I know you got to go here in just a minute, Keith. One last question for you. Thinking again about the most intriguing risk-reward combos. Kruz Schoolcraft, which is an absolute productive outs made
it's an
up
80 name. Oh, yes.
80 name. Like, I mean, I didn't see their account when that pick happened, but I'm sure they were just going wild at the time. Yeah. It goes to the Padres at 25th overall, a 6'8" lefty out of high school. I mean, just sign me up. I don't need to know anything else. I'm excited about that. But what does Kruz Schoolcraft bring to the table already as a 6'8" lefty out of high school?
It is. I'm actually checking their account to see if they said, oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Somebody literally skeeted. Can we say that? At them.
I'm not going to beep it, but I don't feel comfortable saying it.
No, that's true. It's Kruz Schoolcraft. That's a Productive Outs name if I've ever heard one. And Productive Outs' response was, we could never.
I got him with a different one. I was listening to Alt Nation over the weekend, and it was, which artist was it? I'm going to have to pull it up. But,
take a second and think about it. I'll answer you on Kruz Schoolcraft. Yeah. Give you a second. So Schoolcraft, I think pretty clearly the top high school lefty in the draft. I will not rant again about high school pitching. 6'8", has been up to 98. The velocity and stuff was kind of inconsistent this spring, and there's lots of possible explanations. Nothing wrong with him. I think weather up there, inconsistent schedule does not help. I talked to scouts who said there's not really consistent breaking ball there, or it's not really breaking ball at all. And I talked to other scouts who's like, that was a wipeout slider. So maybe it's in there. Definitely has a changeup that everybody agrees on. Everybody agrees that there's arm strength. Everybody agrees that there's size. He's already got pretty good extension. You could probably tweak it a little bit more. Maybe just get him out front. I mean, a guy who's 6'8", left-handed. Imagine what that's going to look like. I mean, this was basically like Randy Johnson's. Obviously he threw hard also, but one of the biggest things with Randy Johnson was just couldn't see the ball, particularly left on left. And so there's a lot to really like just in terms of raw ingredients here. And, I'm often less critical of the Padres when they take high school pitching because that's just what they do. They've decided, right or wrong, one of our core competencies is developing high school pitchers. Or developing them just a little bit and training them. And that's fine. I got no issue with that. Because I don't know that a lot of those guys have necessarily worked out, but they have decided this is our focus. And especially if the whole industry is moving away from high school pitchers, we want to move towards high school pitchers. I also respect that. I probably still wouldn't do it, but I completely understand what they are trying to do. And not for nothing, I think they got the best high school lefty in the draft, at least in terms of on draft day, just like with Seth Hernandez. Whether you think the Pirates were right or not, take him at 6. They got the best high school righty in the draft. That is something. If you get the best X in a draft, that is usually something good. The best catcher, the best shortstop, the best high school lefty. These are real things. And so that's why, honestly, if a lot of other teams took Kruz Schoolcraft first, it might have been a little bit more critical. But in this case, that's fine. The Padres they're Padresing, and that's fine.
And they've shown enough ability to do that effectively where it doesn't seem as risky to them as it would be for other clubs trying to kind of move out of their own identity to pull it off.
Right. If nothing else, they flip those guys in trades to continue contending, and that's good too.
And that's why I think I like the Case and Cunningham pick by the Diamondbacks at 18. Mm-hmm. You described fun-sized players. Like they got one, Corbin Carroll, and Cunningham's even smaller than Corbin Carroll.
Oh, yeah, he definitely is. He's taller than Slade Caldwell, who I met. I actually shook Slade's hand. Fun guy to talk to, and also very fun-sized. I'm 5'6", and he is 5'7". Don't let him tell you anything else. He is 5'7", 1,000%. But like a brick house. I mean, that he is super
good edit. Good edit on brick.
You.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I've heard a lot of soccer coaches describe center backs with the word you're about to use too. So it's a common expression across sports to describe people built that way. But are teams still more scared of smaller players than they should be?
Yeah, we're getting away from that.
Good.
There's a little bit with shorter pitchers. I think we are getting a little away from this idea that shorter pitchers break down. Mm-hmm. There's a whole thing. There's a difference between short and slight. Short can work. You have additional challenges as a short guy, getting more leverage into your swing, getting on top of the ball better, or getting more depth on a breaking ball if you're a pitcher. But slight is not the same thing as short, and vice versa, right? I am short and slight. But that's right. If you have a narrow frame, narrow bone structure, right? There are things you can see what a player looks like and say, there's not a lot of projection there. He kind of is what he is. People said that a lot about Caldwell when he was coming out of the draft. And I get that in terms of as hard as he hits it now, that's probably about as hard as he's going to hit it. But he is not slight at all. Like he is strong. He's got broad shoulders, broad enough for a 5'7" guy that he's going to be fine. He's going to hit the ball hard enough to have an impact. He's not going to be a power hitter, but what you want to do is just be able to hit it hard enough that you're able to keep your batting average up, essentially, that those balls in play are hard hit enough, particularly line drives, that you're getting on base ultimately. And so that's the separation. That's why when people are like, oh, he's short. Case Cunningham is probably 5'8"-ish, 5'8.5" maybe. He's very strong also. Like those guys don't generally pop up on the radar. Particularly, I think the post-Nick Madrigal era. I think Madrigal's failure kind of, I would like to think it put a little bit of a nail in the coffin in terms of taking those guys very high, right? Not saying those players shouldn't be drafted, but they shouldn't be first rounders. You're going to take a first rounder who's 5'9" or shorter. He's just got to pass the strength test. That's really all it is. And if he's strong enough, fine, take him. I had no issue with that. Caldwell, Carroll, Slater DeBrun in this year's draft, who the Orioles took, which was kind of interesting. Really good batted ball data. People love the player, love the kid, love the defense. He's pretty strong for a shorter guy. So that's fine. So I think most teams are getting away from that. There's still a few who won't take twerps which I only slightly take personally. But that's fine. Everyone's got a philosophy. The industry as a whole, though, I think we've chilled out a little bit on avoiding the shorter guys, because the fun size guys, because enough of them have had success.
Yeah, it just takes a few breaking through, and then teams realize, we can replicate that. We can make that work. That is actually going to be just fine. Finn Wolfhard was the artist I heard this weekend. I've never heard before.
Stranger Things. He's a Stranger Things actor. Yeah.
Yeah, Finn Wolfhard.
Yeah, that is a productive outs name.
That's a reliever name for sure.
Absolutely.
We're going to let you go, Keith. I know you got some more write-ups to get to, and then you've got a little pre-hibernation before the trade deadline, and then real hibernation. Obviously, I don't know a lot about hibernation, but you will get some rest soon. We appreciate
somewhere in here
all the time and the insight. Blue sky mostly these days for you.
That's where I am. If you have, post the links on the bad place, but that's it. If you want to talk to me, you want to ask questions, and I try to answer lots of them. Never answer all of them, but blue sky or just in the comments under the articles. I do check those pretty regularly. People ask, if you ask good questions, I'll try to give you good answers. If you try to come at the claw, you best not miss. Can't call myself the king. That's a bit much.
Don't wade into that territory. But
no, but I will clap back. People try. I'm not here to make friends.
There's a lot of great stuff we didn't get to on the site. TheAthletic.com/rates and barrels will get you a subscription if you don't have one already, so be sure to check that out. Thanks again to Keith Law for joining me on this episode. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Thursday.